I never thought I'd find myself working closely with my son during an intense artistic session, hearts pounding, lines blurred beyond recognition. But that night, everything changed. Hi, I'm Evelyn, 42 years old, a wife, a mother, and someone who entered an emotional territory I never anticipated. How did a simple painting session turn into the most dangerous emotional territory I've ever stepped into? Have you ever felt seen by someone in a way you didn't even know you were craving? Share your thoughts in the comments. Was it loneliness, weakness, or something much deeper that drove me there? I can't wait to hear your perspective. My story began on a freezing January morning when winter had blanketed everything outside in a thick, silent layer of snow. The world outside seemed still, but my mind was anything but. My son Nathan, a talented 21-year-old artist, had retreated into the room he called his studio, a corner of our house that Nathan had transformed into his own world, overflowing with unfinished paintings, jars of paint, and scattered brushes. That morning, I wrapped myself tightly in a heavy robe to ward off the biting cold seeping through every crack in the house, and sat at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of coffee. Nathan had stayed up late painting the night before, and I didn't have the heart to wake him early. As I quietly stared out at the frost-covered window, the familiar sound of the stairs creaking echoed through the silent house. "Good morning, Mom," Nathan said in his steady voice, holding a cup of tea and a still wet painting. His hair was tousled, his face still carried traces of sleepiness, but his eyes gleamed with intense excitement. Nathan carefully propped the painting against the kitchen counter. I smiled, feeling the vibrant energy radiating from him, even in the midst of the frigid winter. "Did you sleep well last night?" I asked, a mix of curiosity and concern. Nathan shrugged, a shy smile appearing on his face. "I got caught up working on something. Do you want to see?" I nodded, my heart filling with eager anticipation. Nathan turned the painting around, and the moment I saw it, I gasped softly. It was a breathtaking painting, the figure of a person bathed in soft light, emanating a blend of strength and vulnerability. The depth it carried was profound, far beyond what I thought a 21-year-old could capture. "It's beautiful, Nathan," I whispered sincerely. "You have a rare gift." Nathan blushed slightly, a touch of red coloring his cheeks. "Thank you, Mom. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have come this far." We shared a moment of silence, needing no words. That silent understanding ran deep, between mother and son, between two lonely souls under the same cold roof. My husband, the man I had called my partner for decades, was a good man, but his work and his outside interests had always kept him away from home. That absence lingered like a quiet ghost in my life, leaving behind empty spaces I had learned to accept over time. But in that moment, looking at Nathan, my son, who had grown into a remarkable man right before my eyes, I knew one thing for certain. We shared a strong emotional connection I deeply valued. That afternoon, as the weak sunlight filtered through the frost-covered windows, I couldn't resist my curiosity. I quietly made my way to Nathan's studio. The room was filled with the scent of oil paint, aged canvas, and the wooden aroma of handmade frames. A soft golden light seeped in, casting a serene beauty over the unfinished paintings. Nathan was standing before the easel, his brush moving with absolute focus. He looked up when he noticed me. A light smile crossed his face, half apologetic, half inviting. "Curious about what I'm working on, Mom?" Nathan teased, his eyes glowing with familiar warmth. I smiled and stepped lightly inside. "Perhaps, can I see it?" Nathan leaned aside, revealing the painting. It was a series of hands. Each hand captured a different emotion, painted with strokes both delicate and powerful. A trembling hand of pain, a soft hand of comfort, a clenched hand of determination. I couldn't hide my admiration. "They're beautiful, Nathan. You always see things others often miss." Nathan put down his brush and turned to look at me with a thoughtful gaze. "I want to start a new series, Mom, about the human body, but not just form. I want to paint emotions, connections, things words can't express." My heart stirred. Nathan's words resonated deeply, highlighting my emotional loneliness. The place where I had buried my loneliness My longing to be heard, to be seen, to be understood. I nodded, whispering softly, "You always have a very special way of seeing the world, Nathan." In that moment, I felt the invisible bond between us tighten a little more. Not just mother and son, but two solitary souls finding a rare harmony. A cold breeze slipped through the window cracks, lifting the curtains slightly as if to emphasize the heavy stillness in the room. That evening, the house felt even emptier as my husband, as usual, was absent for a bowling night with his friends. It was just Nathan and me, two warm presences against a freezing winter. I sat in the living room, flipping through an old magazine, trying to occupy myself with a false sense of busyness to cover the emptiness. Suddenly, Nathan came out of the studio, holding a small box. The light from the fireplace reflected in his eyes, making them seem as if they were burning. "Mom, I have an idea," Nathan said, placing the box in front of me, his voice filled with excitement. I looked up, surprised. "What is it?" Nathan rubbed his hands together as if trying to contain his excitement. "I want to paint you. Not just a regular portrait, but to paint you the way I really see you." I froze, not because of the idea of being painted, but because of the way Nathan looked at me. Sincere, earnest, as if I was his entire world. "There's a gift in the box," Nathan continued, smiling a little shyly. "I want you to wear it when you pose." My heart raced as I opened the small box. Inside was a red satin robe, smooth and shimmering under the firelight. Surprised and flustered, I looked up at Nathan. His gaze was calm, sincere, without a trace of pressure or awkwardness. Only trust, admiration, and a deep, unspoken wish. "Let me paint you as you truly are." I sat still, my hands trembling slightly as I brushed my fingers over the smooth satin fabric. Its deep red color glowed like a smoldering fire in the freezing winter, both seductive and leaving me feeling more exposed than ever. Nathan didn't rush me, he just stood there, his eyes patient, respecting whatever decision I would make. I took a deep breath. Part of me, the mother, the woman who had long buried herself under layers of duty, hesitated. But another part, the one quietly yearning to be seen, to be felt, stirred restlessly to answer. "All right," I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. A bright smile broke across Nathan's face. Without hurrying, he nodded and pointed toward the staircase. "I'll get everything ready. You can change and come down when you're ready." He hugged the box to my chest, walking slowly upstairs. Each step felt like it was stretching the space between my reason and my emotions. The bedroom door closed behind me. Alone, I stood before the mirror. I slipped off the thick, heavy clothes, revealing skin no longer taut as in my youth, but still bearing the softness of a woman seasoned by time. I draped the robe over my shoulders. The cool satin slid over every curve, clinging to my body as if it had been made just for me. Standing before the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. A mother, a wife, a woman, living in a body seemingly worn down by time and obligations. Yet at that moment, my eyes suddenly lit up. I realized that deep inside, I was still there. Evelyn, full of desires, intense emotions, and dreams that had never been voiced. I pulled the robe tighter around myself, gathering all my courage to go downstairs. Nathan had rearranged the living room. The armchair was pulled closer to the roaring fireplace. A soft white curtain hung loosely behind it, serving as a backdrop for the flickering firelight. The space was filled with a gentle, warm, dreamlike glow. When I appeared, Nathan looked up. His gaze lingered on me, openly admiring. It wasn't the gaze of a child anymore, nor entirely that of a grown man, but a strange merging of both. Reverence, wonder, and the breath of something unnamed. "You look beautiful," Nathan said, his voice low and slightly hoarse. I smiled faintly, trying to hide my fluster, and walked over to sit in the chair as he directed. "I want you to sit however feels most comfortable, most natural," Nathan instructed, breast poised in his hand. I nodded, letting myself sink into the warmth of the fireplace, letting go of the daily worries weighing down my shoulders. The soft clinks of the brush against the palette, the steady sound of the first strokes on the canvas filled the silence, like a calm and even heartbeat. Nathan painted silently, occasionally glancing up, his deep, dark eyes studying every detail. The curve of my wrist, the way the light spilled over my collarbone, the gentle folds of the robe across my shoulders. I could feel Nathan carefully observed my pose, dedicated to capturing each detail artistically, tender yet deliberate. Each time our eyes accidentally met, I felt deeply moved and emotionally stirred. No one said anything, but we both felt it, something quietly shifting between us. Our relationship shifted into unfamiliar emotional territory, no longer just artist and muse, something else. An intense emotional vulnerability was quietly developing between us on that silent winter night. The firelight from the fireplace reflected on the walls, bathing the room in flickering shades of orange and red. Every time Nathan's brush swept across the canvas, I felt as if he was not only painting my outward form, but also touching the deepest emotions within me. I sat still, unmoving, but inside, every sense was stretched taut like a string about to snap. After a while, Nathan put the brush down, wiped his hands with a small cloth, and approached me. "Are you cold, Mom?" And his voice was warm and gentle. I shook my head, but my heart trembled harder than the cold wind outside. "I just want to adjust a little," Nathan said, his voice so soft it seemed afraid to disturb the enveloping stillness. I nodded without speaking. He reached out, gently lifting my chin so the light from the fireplace could fall across my face. Nathan's hand was warm and steady, but the closeness made my heart clench. His gaze held mine, unwavering, unhesitant. And in that moment, I saw in Nathan's eyes a boundless trust, a silent admiration that needed no words. I should have looked away. I knew. but I, Nathan's hand fell away lightly, but the distance between us was now just a breath. Julian see he had clenched his hand as if gathering courage. "I've never seen anyone as beautiful as you are right now." I swallowed hard. How long had it been since I last heard such words? Not from David, my increasingly distant husband. Not from those around me whose glances had become cold and indifferent. Only Nathan, with his unhidden sincerity, made me feel seen, made me feel valued. I smiled, a trembling smile, more than a joyful one. "You're always too good to me," I whispered. But in our eyes, both of us knew that what had just passed between us was a deep, unnameable connection, still within boundaries, but undeniable. The room fell into silence again. Nathan picked up the brush, returning to the canvas, but between us, something had quietly and permanently shifted. I sat there, letting the fire gently warm my satin robe, feeling Nathan's occasional glances, no longer the gaze of a child, but a quiet acknowledgement, full of feeling. Time flowed slowly, as if every second became thick and unforgettable. When Nathan put down his brush again, he approached and sat in front of me, his deep brown eyes silently asking, not with words, but with a patient waiting. I placed my hand gently on his tousled hair, an unspoken response, a light, simple touch, like two souls finding each other after a long, lonely journey. There were no words, no lines crossed, only presence, only healing. A quiet, tender feeling, enough for two wounded souls to know that they were no longer alone. After that kiss, the room seemed to become more suffocating due to the unspoken emotions. Nathan was still sitting in front of me, his face a mixture of fear and hope. I stood up, took a few steps towards the fireplace, needing some distance to catch my breath. But I could clearly feel Nathan's gaze still following my every slightest movement. "Mom," he called softly, his voice choked in his throat. I turned back, touched those eyes that contained all the sincerity, longing, and even confusion. I softly spoke, but then stopped. Because is there any word strong enough to explain the emotions swirling in my heart right now? Is there any words to justify what just happened? Nathan slowly stood up, walked towards me, not in a hurry, not in a rush. Each step is like a silent question, and I am the only one who holds the answer. "Do you regret it, Mom?" you ask. Your voice trembling, but your gaze resolute. I looked at you for a long time, sensing the fear, the innocence, and the budding courage in that question. Regret? I regret letting myself be lonely for too long. I regret having let emptiness fill every crevice of my heart. But this moment, I have no regrets. I shook my head softly but firmly. Nathan let out a long breath as if he had just lifted a heavy burden. He stepped closer, and this time I didn't back away. Nathan's hand found mine, gripping tightly, warmly. Without words, we both understood that between us, a fragile boundary had been broken and it would never be able to be rebuilt as it once was. I'm gonna be sad, Mom, Nathan whispered, his eyes seeming to hold me. I just want you to be happy, Mom. I smiled sadly, my heart tightening. Since when did the one who needed protection become the one searching for the lost piece of my soul? I gently stroked his face, the gesture tender like the years when he was a child, and I used to lull him to sleep every afternoon. Huxley, don't. But this time, the touch was no longer just a maternal affection. It contained something deeper, more painful, and also more beautiful. We stood very close to each other, and when Nathan gently reassured me with a supportive touch on my shoulder, I closed my eyes. A simple, innocent kiss. But it made my tears uncontrollably flow, not because of regret, not out of fear, but because for the first time in many years, I was seen by someone, truly seen, with all my vulnerability, hurt, and longing. Nathan stood beside me quietly, offering silent comfort and support, as if wanting to shield me from the world outside. I let myself lean on you, letting go of all the strong facades I had been carrying for so long. I'm here, Nathan whispered in my ear. I will not leave you alone anymore. I know that promise was naive. I know that what is happening is a mistake in the eyes of society, of norms. But at that moment, in the room filled with warm light, there were only two people, two lonely souls who found each other. I let myself fall into that embrace, at least for tonight, because tomorrow, I'm not sure we will have enough courage to face reality. But tonight, in this biting winter, I am alive, to feel, to be loved. The next morning, the soft winter sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a gentle yellow hue across the room. I woke up, the blanket still warm, and my heart heavy with everything that had happened. Nathan was no longer there. I sat up, leaning against the headboard, listening to the silence around me, a silence no longer peaceful, but filled with anticipation and confusion. Downstairs, I could hear the faint clink of dishes. I quickly threw on a robe and made my way downstairs, my heart racing. Nathan was standing by the kitchen counter, preparing breakfast as if everything were normal. His gaze met mine, and in that moment, I saw all the worry, love, and regret mingling in his eyes. Good morning, Mom. Nathan spoke first, his voice deep but slightly trembling. Would you like some coffee? I nodded, hardly believing my own voice would be steady if I spoke. Nathan poured coffee into my favorite mug, careful as though every little action might shatter the fragile barrier between us. I took the cup, my hand lightly brushing against his. That touch, though brief, was enough to make both of us freeze. Nathan looked at me, wanting to say something, but then he stopped himself. I sat down at the dining table, my hands gripping the cup tightly, clinging to the last fragile bit of normalcy. Mom, May. Finally, Nathan spoke, hesitantly. I'm sorry if everything that happened last night made you feel uncomfortable. I looked up, our eyes locking. In that gaze, there was no accusation, only a quiet pain. I slowly shook my head. No, Nathan. My voice was hoarse. I don't regret it, but we need time to understand what this means. Nathan pressed his lips together, nodding. He sat down across from me, the space between us both intimate and laden with unspoken words. We sat in silence for a long while. Outside, the snow began to fall gently, each flake landing softly on the windowsill. I watched the snowflakes, wondering when my life had drifted so far from everything I once knew. I used to be a strong, determined woman, a model wife, a devoted mother, Yet here I was, sitting in front of my son, holding emotions I couldn't name. I know, I said slowly. Everything between us last night is wrong by what the world outside would think. Here Nathan clenched his fists, placing them on the table. I don't care about the world outside, he said, his voice choked. I only care about you. I don't want you to be alone another day. My heart tightened. Had anyone ever looked at me like that over all these years? Had anyone ever seen the loneliness in me as clearly as Nathan did right now? But you deserve a full life, Nathan, I whispered. Not because of me, not because of my shortcomings. Nathan shook his head vigorously. You don't understand, he said, his eyes bright with emotion. You're not a deficiency. You are the light in my life, the reason I want to be a better person. Tears silently spilled from my eyes. I put my hand over my mouth, not wanting to cry aloud. Nathan stood up, walked around the table, and knelt in front of me. I deeply care about you and never want you to feel alone again. I collapsed, resting my head on his shoulder, no longer resisting, no longer denying. Only two people holding each other in a world that they knew would never accept them. But in that moment, there was only truth. And the truth was I had been seen, I had been loved in a way I had once thought I would never experience again in this life. That morning, we sat together for a long time, as if the moment we parted, everything would shatter. Nathan was still kneeling in front of me, his hands tightly gripping mine, his gaze urgent as if he wanted to etch this moment deep into his heart. I gently lifted his chin, forcing myself to meet his eyes filled with admiration, longing, and a silent pain. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. Nathan, I whispered, we need to think this through carefully. What happened last night, it's not just a fleeting emotion. It will change everything. He nodded, unwavering. I know, and I accept it. My heart tightened. While the snow continued to fall outside, inside I was burning with emotions rising within me. A part of me wanted to run away, to hide from the truth that was laid so bare between us. But another part, the weak part, the part that had been lonely for so long, held on, longing to stay just a little longer. I stood up, and Nathan followed, never taking his eyes off me. The distance between us now felt so fragile. A single touch was enough to make all boundaries completely break down. I'm going for a walk, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I need to think. Nathan didn't stop me. He just nodded slowly, his eyes filled with the pain he tried to hide. I threw on my coat and stepped outside. The cold air hit my face, making me feel a little more awake. The snow was still falling, its delicate flakes sparkling under the weak winter morning light. I walked down the snow-covered path, my footprints left behind like traces of the past, impossible to erase. I thought about Nathan, his gaze, the words he whispered in my ear last night. I thought about the long years with David, the husband who was absent even when he was home, the man who let me silently wither away in my own life. And I thought about myself, the woman who once dreamed, who once loved passionately, who once believed she deserved to be seen, to be loved. When had I lost myself like this? A cold wind blew through, making me shiver. I pulled my coat tighter around me as if to protect the little warmth that remained. But the real warmth I knew didn't come from the coat. It came from Nathan's gaze, from his strong embrace, from the feeling of being seen and loved after so many years of fading into invisibility. I turned back toward the house, my heart heavy. I knew I couldn't keep running away. A decision had to be made, a decision that would change everything. When I opened the door and stepped inside, Nathan was already sitting on the couch, waiting for me as if his entire world was contained in my presence. When he saw me, he stood up quickly, his eyes filled with hope and worry. Mom, Heath hesitated. Have you thought about it? I walked slowly toward him. My hands trembled slightly as I reached up to touch Nathan's cheek. He leaned into my hand like a small cat seeking warmth, closing his eyes and exhaling deeply. Nathan, I said, my voice catching, I can't deny what we felt, but you have to understand you still have your whole future ahead of you. Nathan opened his eyes and looked directly at me, his gaze alight with fire. I know what I'm doing. I don't regret it. Young man, I gently squeezed his hand as if drawing courage from the young man I had raised, loved, and now loved in a way the world would never accept. And I whispered, let time guide us, Nathan. We don't need to rush, but I can't pretend like nothing has happened. A small smile appeared on his lips. Nathan leaned down and gently reassured me with kind, comforting words, gentle, reverent, full of silent vows. I'll wait, he whispered in my ear, no matter how long. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps, somewhere out there, love, though unconventional, though wrong in the eyes of the world, could still bloom. If we dared to listen to our heart. Time passed, but that winter night remained etched in my mind like a tender wound. Day by day, Nathan and I lived in a new rhythm, silent, cautious, but not hidden. We didn't label what was happening between us, neither rushing nor trying to deny it. We were simply there, together, allowing small moments to weave into a feeling that was both sweet and dangerous. David, my husband, seemed to notice no change at all. He was still busy with work, with long business trips and phone calls that ended abruptly with, I have to go to a meeting. I still managed everything like a familiar shadow, but my heart was no longer whole. Every time I looked into Nathan's eyes, I knew I had gone too far to turn back. There were nights when Nathan would sit drawing in the studio and I would sit next to him reading a book that I could barely focus on. Just looking up, I would catch his gaze, a look that was enough to break down every wall I had built inside me. Thus, between the brushstrokes and gentle gestures, our emotional connection became stronger, deeply meaningful, and supportive. One rainy afternoon, Nathan left his unfinished drawing and approached me. He knelt down before the chair I was sitting in, taking my hand in his eyes more serious than ever before. Mom, Nathan whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. I'm not going anywhere. I don't care what the world thinks. I just need you. I bit my lip, trying not to let the tears escape. Nathan, don't. He shook his head, his gaze burning. I know you're scared, but you're not fighting alone. I'm here. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't deny it any longer. I deeply valued his presence as much as he valued mine. A longing to be seen, to be held, to be loved as a person, not just as a good mother or a dutiful wife. We embraced, in that room filled with the smell of paint and the sound of rain falling outside. An embrace that was no longer just a comfort, but a silent vow that, whether right or wrong, we would not let go. But reality never allows happiness like that to last forever. On a night just like any other,